What does an abandoned golf course look like? Welcome to my channel. Another Bibliophile Reads. This is week 10 of the 100 book challenge, where I have challenged myself to read 100 books that I already own before buying another book. And as of this morning, I am at book 51, soon to finish book 52. I'm well on my way to finishing this challenge. I have finished reading my 52nd book, Johnny Got His Gun by Dalton Thrumbo, originally published in 1938. This is an anti-war novel set in World War I or thereabouts. Dalton Thrumbo was flirting with the Communist Party when he wrote this. It's kind of common for authors back then to be at least a little bit communist, because they really did not know what was going on in the Soviet Union at the time. But this is the story of a young man sent off to war, World War I specifically, although it had just been called the Great War at the time. And it starts off that he is in hospital. He knows he's been seriously injured. He was in a shell blast, and he thinks the extent of his injuries is that he's deaf, that the concussion of the blast just made him deaf. He knows his head is covered in bandages, so he can't see at the time. But he is mistaken. His injuries are a lot more serious than just deafness. I'll leave it at that. And just the extent of his injuries become truly horrific as you get through this book, and as he realizes just how badly wounded he was. And as he's lying in the hospital bed, you get interspersed memories of his life before the war, as a youth, going out with ladies, going out with friends, and just enjoying life to its fullest. And the story is remarkably evocative of that time. I could see myself living in that era before the war, and Colorado. And Dalton Thrumbo is just a magnificent writer in evoking that feeling. And then you get some devastating scenes as I say narrator, even though it's technically in third person. It's kind of first person too, stream of consciousness. A very odd style. The book has no commas, and the lack of commas is to get the reader to focus more on the text. And I'll leave it at that, other than I say that this is truly a magnificent book. It also counts as a banned book, because I said this book was published in 1939, really before World War II started kicking into high gear. And it became obvious that an anti-war novel really had no place during World War II. So this book was taken out of publication, somewhat voluntarily by the author. And it has been banned in other instances. There's instances in the 70s where this book got banned a few times. So it also counts as a banned book. But also, it's just a book that's fantastic to read. Thrumbo never wrote another novel that I know of. He did go on to become a very famous screenwriter, and he is one of the famous blacklisted screenwriters from the McCarthy era. But he did manage to write some screenplays, very famous screenplays, under a pen name. I highly recommend this book. Rappahannock River is flooding. I have finished my 53rd book, Breeding Ground by Shaun Hutson. This is a sequel written in 1995 to his 1982 book, The Slugs. It is a book about killer slugs. So, it's lacking and a little bit of reality. Now, his novel, The Slugs, is up there with the top of the killer animal books. It's right there behind The Rats. It might even be on equal footing with James Herbert's The Rats, or just a little bit behind. But Breeding Ground, well, it suffers a little bit from that sequelitis that you're sort of feeling you're reading a bit of the same story over again with slightly different characters. This time it is set in London, but it does have carnivorous slugs. And that's enough. Now, when I was reading this, I laid out my Kindle on the counter before dinner, and my wife looked at it, and she sort of says, "Oh, that does not look like a very happy book that you're reading." And I had to admit that it was about killer slugs. And she goes, "Shouldn't you be reading that for Garbogist?" Little does she know that I dip into Garbogist material throughout the year. Now, again, this does not stand up to the slugs. It's just okay. It's average. It's fun, entertaining, lots of gory kill scenes. In the introduction, the author mentions there's one very infamous scene. He wouldn't name it in the introduction, and I'm pretty sure I know what scene he's talking about in this book. I don't know if it's all that infamous, but you'll have to read the book and find out for yourself. Can't go wrong, or can't go too wrong, with killer slugs. I have finished reading my 54th book, The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, originally published in German 1915. I read the translation by Susan Bernofsky. This is a book that I discovered on my Kindle, rooting around looking for something else. I purchased it in 2019, and I completely forgot that I had this. Now, this is a reread for me, but it is a first read of this translation. This is the story of Gregor Samsa, who awoke one morning to find himself transformed into a monstrous insect. Now, depending on your translation, that word insect is going to be translated maybe vermin or bug or something else. In the afterword, the translator was saying that the word itself is kind of vague in German. It depicts something six-legged, but not exact. Well, anyway, Gregor Samsa is a traveling salesman who works to support his family. He's got his father and mother and sister, and none of them work, and he supports them. But it's a hard job, and his real concern is, how do I get ahead in my job to support my family? And then one day he wakes up into this giant insect, and he can no longer support his family. And it is not exactly his thoughts, but it's his feelings and some of his thoughts, and how he survives as this giant insect, and what his family think of him, and what his employer, who came to his door on the day that he did not show up, thinks about him. And of course, his employer was totally mortified to see this huge insect in Gregor Samsa's room. It's not quite clear if the employer knew that the insect was Gregor Samsa. But how does he survive? And how does he communicate to his family? Because he can't talk. And there's this issue that he wants to say, I am Gregor Samsa. But his sister knows. I think she knows. And his family, his mother, his father, they're sort of reluctant to believe that Gregor Samsa is now this giant insect. And it's fascinating because earlier in this week I finished Johnny Got His Gun, and Joe also had a problem communicating his inner feelings, his inner person, that even though he was a limbless hunk of meat, he was still a person inside. And even though Gregor Samsa is a giant insect, he is still a person inside. And this is, of course, one of the early sort of existentialist classics. It was also banned by the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. I guess it sort of counts as reading a banned book then. I have finished reading my 55th book, Flood by Andrew Vachss. This book was originally published in 1985. It is the first in the Burke series. Burke is a criminal living on the outskirts of society in New York City. He is sort of a private detective, even though he doesn't really advertise his services. But one day a woman named Flood comes into his place of business and wants to hire him to track down a child molester, a child rapist. And this child rapist is responsible for the death of a good friend of hers and her daughter. And she wants Burke to find him so she can kill him with her bare hands. She is a self-trained martial arts expert. And at first, Burke says, I don't get involved with murder. I've been in prison. I don't want to go back to prison. Not my thing. But for a variety of reasons, he does agree to help her. And he learns that the man that she wants to kill is a real scumbag. And that sort of helps influence him. And this, I said, this book is set in New York City during the 80s. So it is a very gritty and nasty city, but it's utterly fascinating. It's full of life. I can see why, as a youth, when I first read this book in my early 20s, why I wanted to move to New York City, even though it was, I said, gritty and nasty and dangerous and not all that pleasant, but a city that just drew you in to its culture and its people. Because Burke has a family. This is what you call a found family. He has a transsexual prostitute that he uses as someone to help gain customers, or people's not customers, to help gain help from other people who she can influence. There is a homeless prophet. He calls himself the prophet or the professor. There is a martial art expert who's deaf and dumb, who is truly a powerful warrior. A woman named Mama, who runs a restaurant that really does not want to serve people food. It's a front for other businesses. And a man named the Mole. He is a genius, and he lives underground in an abandoned junkyard. Well, I shouldn't say it's abandoned because he's there, but it's not really used as a junkyard. It's used as his front for doing his sort of criminal business, which is mostly helping Israel and to track down Nazis. And then there is Pansy. Pansy is a Neapolitan Mastiff. That is just a huge dog. And he named her Pansy because he used to have another Doberman Pinscher named Devil. And Devil bit someone. And he had to make Devil run away and find a new home. So his lawyer says, maybe your dogs should not have such an aggressive name. So he named his dog Pansy. And she's a really good dog. And this story, it's a great little detective story as he seeks out ways to find this child molester, this rapist, who has gone underground and is looking for a way to escape New York City and find a new career. I really enjoyed this. As I said, this is the first of a series. I read up to book 9 or 10 originally, and then I stopped reading it for some reason or another. I want to go back and reread these. I don't know if I'll continue the whole series again. It's like 20 books in a series, so that's kind of a huge commitment. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But I definitely want to continue and revisit Burke and his found family and his way of helping people in need. Now, one of the things about this series is that he's always helping children who have been abused by the system, because Vachss was a lawyer who did that in real life. He protected abused children. And so when he's describing this in the introduction, that when he originally submitted this book for publication, it got turned down a lot because there's a lot of detail of sexual abuse of children that happened in the real world. And the publisher is going, we don't really want to deal with that. But it's good. I like this book. I can highly recommend it. I have finished my 56th book, The Art of Asking Your Boss for a Raise by Georges Perec, translated from the French into English by David Bellos, originally published in 1968 and translated 2011. This came about from George Perec after reading a contest from a computer company. Now, in the old days, in the 60s, computers were these massive machines that did a whole lot of processing and took up rooms to fill. But they developed a flow chart that they wanted people to turn into a short story. And you get this flow chart in the book, as you see. And it starts off where it says, go see Mr. X. And this is the person's boss. And you're going to your boss to ask for a raise. And it goes through all these different issues of what you have to do. Is your boss in the office? If no, go back to your desk. If he's at his office and you knock on his door, does he answer? If he doesn't answer, go back to your desk. If he answers but gives you a dismissive glance, go back to your desk. And the book basically follows all these different possibilities in the flow chart. Now, I'm going to read you a little quote from the translator about this book. Translating a text which is close to being unreadable in the original is a paradoxical, but not a particularly difficult task, since ordinary readability is hardly an issue. Now, if you look at the text of this book, it is all one stream of run-on text. There are no paragraph breaks. There are no capitals. The only punctuation you get are apostrophes, em dashes, and dashes, and one period at the very end of the book. Other than that is just this stream flow of words. Gibberish in English, gibberish in the original French, and gibberish in English. This is not a book that is really inducive to people to read. It is a huge slog. 99.9% of the people who pick up this book probably will not finish it. I scanned a lot of the text. Now, my eye did gaze over every page of this book, but a lot of it just was not interesting. It was an experiment that Georges Perec did to follow this flow chart. And then the English translator just, like I said, just routinely translated in English from French. I really cannot recommend this book. I guess I'm glad I read it in a way because I am fond of the author Georges Perec. He has written some really fascinating books in a number of different styles. He has written a lipogram, which is just writing something without a certain letter, and that certain letter was the letter E. It was magnificently translated into English without using the letter E, but it's a complicated book, that lipogram. And this one, really, you can skip it. Be assured you don't have to read this. Okay, that is a wrap for week 10. I'm at book 56. I'm well on my way to finishing by the 20th week. I will not be the first person to finish this contest this year, but I don't mind. Anyway, onward to week 11. Thank you for watching, and keep on reading.